Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is James Bassett, and I have the privilege of being your host for today's panel. It's round two of how AR will transform retail over the next decade. This is the second in a series of virtual events called Shape the Future. And with Shape the Future, we really hope to bring together leaders in augmented and virtual reality, together with brands and retailers and retail enterprises that are really helping using this technology to push their organizations forward. We're also trying to push the bounds of what we can do with these live events. We're really trying to focus on building community. So we've put a series together and we're trying to go deep together. We also want to make sure that all your questions and all your opportunities are being circulated around the Shape the Future community. So please reach out to us online. This event today, we are going to be live tweeting with the hashtags Shape the Future and Retail AR. So if you have any questions for our panel, please submit your questions there on Twitter and we'll do our best to get to them. So it's round two. The panel was so good last time that we said we've got to get the whole team back together as soon as we can. And we ended up with a few hundred viewers, but almost 100 questions. And we said, can we focus on the Q&A? Can we answer the questions that were submitted by the community last time? And can we go a level deeper? Can we really start to dig into some of the really wonderful stories that we started to tell about AR and VR last time? And this event is a really wonderful product of a few groups. Our sponsors today are Accenture Interactive, Shape Immersive, and the Vancouver VR AR Association. Our organizers are Alex Chuang and Dan Berger. Alex and Dan have been working tirelessly over the last decade to try to connect the global XR community. And at the same time, have found a way to build Vancouver into a top 2 VR AR hub. Accenture Interactive has a strategic initiative called Accenture XR. It's a practice that uses human-centered design principles, industry knowledge, and expertise to help global companies imagine, create, and deliver XR experiences across organizations to unlock business value. The Vancouver VR AR Association is a connected group of about 250 member companies. The mission is to make Vancouver a leading hub for growing and scaling XR companies and ventures. And Shape Immersive, we're an innovation agency that partners with brands and enterprises to use AR and 3D commerce to push their organizations forward, whether that be lowering the cost of converting online or building some really, really wonderful and immersive XR brand experiences. Today's Q&A is going to last about 60 minutes. And again, if you have any questions, use the hashtags on Twitter, Shape the Future and Retail AR. We've got some really great people that I can see here streaming in from a number of retail and leading XR companies. So, we're doing a good job to build the community. If you know other people in your network that would really benefit from understanding the future of AR and VR, please, for the next event, send out an invitation. Our next event is going to be on June 11th, and we've got another unbelievable group coming together that is going to teach us about how we can get the most out of AR and VR. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful panel. We have our moderator today, the unbeatable Amy Peck. Amy, will you take it away?
Thanks so much, James. Yes, backed by popular demand, we have our wonderful panel here. I thought actually if we, for those who are joining for the first time, if all of you can just do a quick intro. Most of you don't need any introduction, but just tell us what you do. Let's start with you, Rafaela.
Good morning, everyone. Rafaela Camera, talking to you from Santa Monica, California. Very sunny today. The beaches are open, but we're still in lockdown. I'm Global Head of Innovation and Strategy at Accenture XR. So an entire practice, a global practice dedicated to AR, VR, and MR. Excellent. And Tony Parisi.
Hey everyone, I'm Tony. I am head of AR and VR advertising innovation at Unity. That's the content creation platform most people use to make their mobile games, AR and VR. We also have a massive ad network that reaches approaching 2 billion people worldwide, about 3/4 of the US population on mobile. So I'm very interested in how we advertise on mobile and how we can do that with technologies like AR and VR. We have an AR ad product now in that mobile supply, and a lot of that advertising is used to advertise physical products. And so we're looking at the future of retail and what that means in terms of discovering products on your phone and online, interacting with them in 3D, and then buying them and hopefully not returning them to the store you bought them from. And so I'm excited to talk with the gang today about all that.
Excellent. And Elliott Round.
Hey everyone, Elliot here. I'm the CTO and co-founder of MXR. We're a London-based 3D production company specializing in R&D, and we're currently developing the next generation of 3D capture systems.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. And we did have so many questions last time, but one of them was really around sort of the focus and measuring ROI, and where should companies get started and focus their resources. And I know, Rafaela, you gave some great examples. Maybe you can start us off by talking about what is a good sort of POC with a scalable path for companies to start with.
When it comes to retail?
Yes.
It depends. It really depends on what you're looking at. I think there is let's say the front end and the back end part of retail. So on the front side, you can look at anything that has to do with a connection with the consumer. So it could be any form of immersive marketing type of XR activity, but it could also be direct commerce. It could be post-sale support of some kind. So when you sell them something, can you then provide support using XR, using AR? And then can you also form a relationship with them that leads to a lead, a name, or bring them then to a more considerate type of sale. On the back end, you can look at anything that has to do with research. So understanding what consumers are really looking for, what they like, what they don't like, how they behave in any environment. And you can use virtual environments to recreate the physical ones. You can also do sales for B2B. We're seeing more and more of that right now because of things being shut down. So you can recreate your environments and sell to the retailers and show your products and do those kind of things directly using AR. And equally, you can also help your manufacturing facilities kind of like perform better tasks and going a little bit faster and lowering the costs by using different forms of AR or VR or a combination of both.
That's great. And Elliot, you shared some great work with Nike. How are those decisions made on how to get started and starting with a view to scale these experiences? And let's talk more on sort of the consumer facing side.
I think the biggest benefit at the moment to the consumer is more being able to kind of get a product in their hands immediately. So with some of the experiences we've done, it hasn't been to catalog an entire collection of products, like not every Nike trainer or every handbag by Mulberry. It's about how can you do things in the virtual world that you can't do in the physical world. So customize a product and see that product almost how you would get it once you've made the purchase. And that seems like a pretty good starting point at the moment for where the XR industry is.
And Tony, and you're looking at sort of those monetization strategies. What is your advice here on these consumer-facing experiences? What is a good starting point, and what are the behaviors you're looking to drive?
When you say starting point, Amy, what do you mean? Exactly?
Well, if companies have not actually had much experience in AR, it seems we got a lot of questions around, what should we focus on to start?
Yeah. So. I mean, this is where it gets interesting because if you focus on just, let's say, building one experience, typically that means you're going to do some kind of production exercise. It's going to be a little bit expensive when you do your first one. And so there's a lot of learning there, and you may not know all the right places to distribute. So that, those first few, if they're experimental, end up not necessarily having the ROI you might want versus, say, leaning in and saying, we're going to take an approach where we take a piece of our catalog and do multiple products, because then you can, actually deliver some things at scale. So, I mean, it's hard. It really depends on what an organization wants to do. I mean, ultimately, I think people need to get started on understanding the practices for digitizing their physical products as soon as possible. I think they also need to get started on creating AR experiences, have some experiences that have some sweet spot between engagement and utility, you know, so fun and utility. So the fun part gets people coming in, the utility, it gets them to stick around and ultimately purchase. So, you know, getting started here is not necessarily easy. I mean, from a where you think standpoint, it's easy. It's like what I just said, like think about how you can digitize pieces of your catalog and think about how you tell your story. In terms of where we're at, we're not quite at the place where I can just point my phone at my product catalog and magically AR appears, right? The production technologies are still a little involved, and people like Elliot are helping solve for that right now. And so, you know, it really depends on which way you want to lean into it, Amy. I'm sorry, that's sort of a very lame response to this. Can we unpack it just a little bit more and get some other people to jump in?
Yeah, let's look at, and this sort of leads into probably what one of the primary goals is there's a question coming in saying, you know, what is a percentage seen of sales conversion?
Yeah, and I actually
AR
answered
and
that.
e-commerce.
I mean, I did a little bit of this, which is like, we don't have a lot of published data yet. You may go to Shopify or Houzz or Wayfair because they're like leading some of the stuff in terms of delivering content that does this, and they may, you know, they sort of talk about it qualitatively. I don't know if they were showing numbers yet. That's on the AR side. And on the VR side, there's the Walmart How to Train Your Dragon thing, which was awesome last year, that sold through merch. I'm not even sure that was really the goal. The goal was to get people to engage with the brand, but they ended up selling through merch. So a little early to get the qualitative information on product sales. I know Rafaela's got a bunch of qualitative stuff, but this is more on the B2B side of this, less on the consumer side.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of, you know, you get data from different things. Sometimes it's not necessarily from the sale of a specific product, but it's from other types of interaction that you might have in AR and VR with other things. I think generally, what Tony said is absolutely correct. Make sure that you digitize your content. Everything, pretty much everything will have to be in 3D, and even more so now. If you look at Ikea, I think their entire catalog right now is 3D. They don't even do it in any other way, and they say that they had an increase of 30% in sales, and it's by the way, it's faster, and they you know, once you have something digitized in 3D, you can use it for anything else. You can use it for marketing activities where you're just trying to connect. You can use it for commerce. You can use it to train your salespeople. You can use it to design or modify the design. You can use it for research. Just think about digitizing all of your 3D content. Then after that, just try to give little things that make people want to engage a little bit more. Don't try to solve for the entire big picture. That's what I would say. Because people don't want that, and I think every technology that has evolved, I know it's a little bit more of a philosophical answer, I'm sorry, but every technology that has evolved hasn't evolved in leaps and bounds like this. You just add a little thing that is seamless and makes life easier for consumers or for users, and then from there it goes. When you look at so I look at AR and VR not as a replacement, but really an augmentation of what's already happening traditionally. There are stats that say that, for example, there is a 70% greater memory encoding if you see something in AR versus seeing it just in the video. Those stats usually tend to come more from AR lenses or AR marketing type of activities. In that sense, there are less stats when it comes to selling something specifically in AR. And I'm not even sure that is necessarily the goal for any retailer or brand right now. It's more about making sure that you are engaged with that brand, you're engaged with that product, and then you can finish your sale wherever you want. I don't think anyone should be pushed to finish the sale in AR if it's easier to do it on your laptop. But there has to be a continuum in the omni-channel journey, or in all the different touch points that you might have digitally. That, yes.
Also coming in the stream, Amy, if you haven't seen this yet, from Tip of Tat. So we got some stats. So Houzz, 11x more likely intent to purchase, spend 2.7 times more. Yeah. And then
that's significant.
Significant. There's a Shopify stat saying 27% uplift in conversion. So these folks are in the, and in Houzz's case, it may have been around, their version of AR is not necessarily even spinning 3D products around. It was like retiling your kitchen. So you're doing some image recognition and some other stuff. Super utilitarian, super amazing, you know, connected right up to things in your catalog where it's less about, you know, spinning around a shoe or, you know, seeing where the washing machine is going to fit in your, you know, in your basement. It is more like, you know, utility around remodels or something. So there's a lot of different use cases buried within that too. I'm sure Shopify's is different. Shopify's is probably more like the things like the strollers they're already showing in 3D. Is it? I can see how it looks in my driveway, see how it looks folded up in the back of my hatchback. So, you know, mileage is probably going to vary there too, but those are both super encouraging stats.
And that dovetails into your point about, you know, utility and fun, right? It's a better, more interesting way to do what you were doing before.
Yeah, and you know, as we all know, online shopping has been a race toward utility and functionality and less fun. I mean, it doesn't have the browsing experience. It doesn't have that sort of touch and feel. So to the extent that this media type can bring some fun back into it, maybe it brings the shopping part back in as opposed to just optimizing buying the way companies like Amazon have done. That's a theory anyway. I don't know if it's purely the novelty of AR right now. Raphael, you wanted to jump in on that, I think.
Yeah, there is a company called Upsells. What they do is they basically they recreate store environments mostly in web VR, and but they are, you know, they're very well recreated photogrammetry. They look beautiful, and then you can basically shop either a collection. So they've done a lot of it to just launch collections or do things like that. Now with being a little bit less able to travel, they're actually starting to do entire collections for the retailers and putting them in these virtual environments in the virtual stores so that you can go through the entire collection. So every item is digitized and you can see them there and you can experience them. They're even doing it for companies like Dior and being able to look at the perfumes, which you wouldn't think, you know, makes a lot of sense in web VR. But actually, when you look at the store and when you see those bottles and they look perfect, it does do something to you emotionally, and you're like, oh yeah, you know, I like that one, and maybe you want to buy it, or it gets you closer. Even if you don't buy it, gets you much closer to buying. The last thing that they also do is sometimes they then connect that to an AR part. So then you can actually bring up the product and you can see it, you can turn it, and it, you know, depending on the type of product that it is, obviously soft goods are a little bit more difficult, but hard goods are easier. And Elliot can talk about that until the end of the world, and he does a great job on all those things. But I mean, there is a lot of activity. Again, though, if you try to take something and, I'm going to build everything in an entire commerce store in VR, just in a VR headset, for example, it becomes a little bit more difficult for a variety of different reasons. So just go in steps.
I like that you brought up Obsessed. We also have something on the Q&A around apparel from Guan. I don't know if you got the Q&A window open here. Is there a short-term opportunity to utilize AR in the apparel industry? I have a few opinions about this. Mostly it's me getting wrapped around the axle on technical limitations right now. So I don't know if we want to go to the technical and production side of apparel, or if we want to stay on the vision part of this.
No, I think it's good. I mean, we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive, and you know, this is the Q&A, and we had so many questions. So yeah, I mean, Tony, I think it'd be good for you to tackle that. You know, keep it in somewhat layman's terms. So
yeah, well, I mean, I'm coming from a company that's got a rendering engine, so you know, we're kind of fairly focused on visual quality, and you know, Elliot already knows how hard it is to make the leather on a handbag, as Raphael already pointed out. Leather on a handbag, or you know, the fabric on a couch look real. Now imagine taking that problem and getting to the folds of the Bowie t-shirt I'm wearing. It gets very complicated. There are technologies coming out. I mean, we're seeing it being pioneered by the film industry, for example, hair, fur, cloth, all these soft materials. It's like VFX and film that have been driving a lot of that innovation. So some of that is at a place where it could be brought into apparel, AR real-time stuff. I mean, there's production tools, digital CAD tools that help with this, that are, you know, doing pre-renders. And the fashion industry has been using those for a few years. But to bring that into real-time the way we're talking about, you know, single items, accessories, and other things like that in AR, it's technically challenging to get the game engines to perform. The content's kind of heavy. Delivering all that is still technically challenging. And then you have to compound that with the try-on aspects of that. Like, how do I make that actually work on someone's body and make that person look good? If they don't look good, they're not going to buy it, and make it look realistic enough so that it's, if it's fictional, they're going to send it back. So those are the technical limitations we have right now. I will say that there has been some inbound interest now from folks in the apparel industry who want to start thinking about standardizing and delivering online along the lines of some of these other hard good initiatives that are happening out there. That's my take.
There's definitely been a lot of kind of uptake and interest from fashion and apparel, since coronavirus, as people are trying to bring these things into their personal environments. But I think the issue is if everyone kind of jumps in on this a bit too quickly, everyone's going to get burned by AR again, and people sort of wanting to buy products within that space are going to go down. I think we need to be a bit cautious as to what kind of products we are putting into augmented reality, with what the technology can allow for. And certain things, like fabrics and cloths which do move, I don't think we're really there yet. I think we will be, but I think kind of jumping the gun could be a bit dangerous to the industry in years to come.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that goes also to Rafaela's point. It's like, don't try and solve everything now. It's like, do things in small tranches, see how the engagement stats look, see, how your end user is reacting, and then sort of build upon that. Let's see, we've got a question around, haptics for AR rendering in apparel. This is one of our clients, Mirasens, does haptic surface textures like leather, brush, steel, and cloth. Again, technically very challenging, but Tony, where do you see that maybe evolving to, or Rafaela?
I think there has been haptics have evolved quite a bit, and yes, you can start feeling a little bit the difference between textures. It's still not quite there yet. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's even further down the road. That is really tough to get anything that feels like at your fingertips like that. I mean, we're still at the place on haptics where it's a lot of like, oh, I push, it pushes back. That's nice, right? I'm getting a sense of tension and pressure, but to get the subtle touch senses, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I think the best you can do for tactility at the moment is just showing off materials in a different kind of array of lighting, because a lot of stuff in the real world you don't have to touch to know what it feels like. You can see how it moves, and that's again why it's so important that we wait for the physics to kind of catch up the cloth, so you can get a sense of a weight and how a cloth would feel by just seeing how it moves. So you don't always, I don't think, need haptics to be perfect.
It's kind of like a visual force feedback instead. Do you guys remember seeing this dog petting VR demo? I felt like it's very similar to this in the sense that there was nothing there. It wasn't one of these things where you go into VR and you pet a fake dog, the physical fake dog. And there was nothing there. It was just graphics, but it was a really nice puppy. And at some point I remember being in an experience like that and actually thinking I was stroking the fur of the dog because it was well done enough. So it's along those lines. I think you're right. You could give visual cues instead, and that could end up convincing the senses well enough.
Yes.
Because it's an analog to the other.
Yeah. And Elliot, actually, I remember for those of you who didn't get to see the first webinar, Elliot, it's on YouTube, and Elliot showed a great example of that. You had sort of a loop where you had sort of a light source kind of traveling over. I think it was a handbag.
Mulberry handbag. But just by being able to see the sort of nuances and the detail of the cloth, the leather for that matter, you could understand what it'd feel like, and you knew, this is leather. This isn't like a plastic leather.
Yeah.
And you can get that with a lot of materials, and it's quite surprising, especially when you're in VR as opposed to AR, how quickly your brain will sort of supplement senses. And we did an experience when I was working at a previous company where you had to wash an elephant, and there was a sponge, and you put it in a bucket of water, and so many people thought their hand was getting wet just because they were seeing something and they were hearing something. Their brain was just, this must be what I'm feeling, and your brain just starts filling in the missing information.
Yeah, I would add to that, lighting and shading is so important, even for products like cereal boxes or those kind of products. P&G is a client of ours, and we spend quite a bit of time making sure that their 3D assets are produced in a certain way to reflect lighting, and the entire environment actually has it just makes a big difference, and that is something that they do want, that they're looking for. So it's not just the flat 3D asset that you're trying to produce.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. This is, how do you suggest to make people aware of AR and VR in countries where these technologies are newer in market? And so what are some of the challenges there about even just letting people know that there's sort of this magical digital landscape?
I think everyone knows. They might not know that it's AR, but I think pretty much anyone in any country has a Snapchat or Facebook, and they use lenses, and that's what AR is. So I think people are using it, and they're using it all the time. They just don't know what it is, which is fine. I think we need to stop trying to sell AR, and we're just trying to sell something, but it doesn't have to be sold as AR to the end consumer. The consumer doesn't care.
Exactly. All right, let's see. We have got, let's see, I've got some more. So how can traditional brick and mortar companies integrate AR now? Is the COVID crisis making this a vital move into sort of a digital first approach? Well, we certainly have time on our hands now to consider this. So yeah.
I mean, there was already, the impending predicted retail apocalypse that so many people were talking about, that was mostly focused on brick and mortar, and just all the urgency on the brick and mortar side from the malls and the retailers to get foot traffic in, to reinvent, to create things that were experiential. And now clearly that doomsday scenario has been completely accelerated by COVID. And I think many brick and retail mortars aren't going to actually survive this. There are chains that are in serious trouble right now, and this is terrible. And of course, and some of them are not able to be nimble enough to move online. Others that have brick and mortar and digital components are thriving. Walmart's on the rise. Their apps surpassed Amazon in the store because their logistics are so damn good that people were like, oh, I can get a thing in 2 days instead of 16 days. That's great. I'm going to Walmart to get it right now. So, I mean, it very much depends. And so I think those brick and mortar folks definitely need to reinvent. They need to anticipate a day, assuming they survive, that people will go back into stores, but it will probably always be different. Or, in the next 3 to 5 years, at least, it's going to be like no one going to want to touch anything. There's going to be fewer people going through on foot. So we need to accommodate all that. Some combination of extending the showroom with AR and VR and virtual technology. Maybe not VR because people aren't going to share the headsets. So the changes are going to be irreversible, and definitely there's going to need to be some reinvention.
Yeah, so you have obviously the practical element, something like an endless aisle, right? Where you can have a multitude of versions of a product, so you don't have to carry them all in the store. You touched on something that's an important evolution in all of these brick and mortars is that they have to become these centers of experience and entertainment. What are some of the ways that you're seeing companies successfully evolve? Certainly, like a Westfield, who's they're really kind of doing this sort of multimodal approach to experience. But for an individual retailer, how do they make that transformation? I know, Rafaela, you've probably done a lot of work on this.
Thank you for putting me on the spot with that one.
Sorry.
I'll be right back on video, guys.
Yeah, go get me a drink. No, well, so what I would say is that retailers are using it sometimes in ways that you might not see, more on the back end side of the house. So anything that has to do with testing different types of environments or different flows or different types of packaging, or where you might want to put a product versus not. That is something that is being done. It evolved from the research that was done in person to on the screen to now in AR or VR. Same thing with then making sure that your products are in fact where they're supposed to be and making sure that there is compliance in the store. You can use AR solutions for that, particularly now that AR glasses are coming out, mixed reality glasses, I'm sorry, I should say, because you can see what it's supposed to look like, juxtaposed with what's in reality, what's really happening there. So I would just say, just remember not to concentrate only on the front end part of the equation, which is what the end consumer, what's the experience for the end consumer, but also how do you get to the most optimal experience for that consumer, and how do you get to the most optimal even physical product or physical environment using AR or VR for that matter. It's easy to forget that, but I think that is a work that actually has been going on for years, versus what consumers see is you know, it's a little bit less so.
Can you share a little bit more? Because you also did, again, for the sake of those who weren't on the first one, you did that study on, I think it was a shelf placement, and it looked like, I think it was maybe cognitive 3D, you know, so really giving some, you know, a granular approach to understanding what that consumer experience is, and actually the surprises of what the, you know, the results were.
Yeah, so what we did is we took a research study that Kellogg's had already done. They were launching a new product, Pop-Tarts Bites. They needed to figure out where on the specific shelf they should put it to make sure that they would not cannibalize sales too much of other products, and they would maximize basically the sales, whichever way it could be. These type of tests, often either you have to do them in the store, which means that you physically have to change the products in the store. You have to get the store employees involved. So the stores have to agree to pay their employees to do that. Then you might have actually a negative impact on sales. So the retailer might not be happy about that. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. Or often you do those kind of things in mock-up stores. So large companies have these environments that they create all around the world. There is, you know, there might be one in Singapore, one in Europe, where you have to bring people in and literally just test different things. If you think about it, it's very costly, right? You have to physically modify an environment, or you might have to create the environment. You might have to bring people there, physically move them, so make them travel. And then you have to create those products, even if it's just some samples, and put them there. If you can do all of that in a virtual environment, and now the products are created in 3D, and so you can go in and modify them as much as you want. You can modify the layout of that specific store as much as possible. And then if you can put consumers or end testers in this environment and make them walk through it like they normally would, and they can grab the product, they can turn it around, they can do everything that they would normally do, well then it's easy to understand how you would do it faster and cheaper, and you would be able to run a lot more tests than normally you would. And we determined that you could do it up to 50% faster and cheaper. But what you can also do, these devices have ways of gathering your behavioral data without you knowing that that's happening. So for us, what we did is we gathered very, very detailed eye tracking data. We use cognitive 3D to analyze that. Again, at a very detailed level, we could see what they looked at, why, for how long, what they were looking at before, were they turning the product while they were looking at it, had they picked it up, were they looking at something else before, did they put it down, did they purchase it, how did all those things compare to other products. And that behavioral data gave us actually a different result. It basically told us that it was better to place the products lower for a variety of different reasons. And that led to an 18% total brand sales increase during testing. So, you know, just take that one example and then magnify it and extrapolate. Research done in a virtual environment of any kind makes a lot of sense, not just for a store. It could be for a theater. It could be for banks. Banks want to do it. Because they want to figure out how to make customers go through. Gas stations are very interested in this kind of things because they want to take people from the gas pump into the convenience store to buy something. So how do they optimize that? So again, there are lots of different ways of thinking about how to use AR and VR in the retail space that often are not so talked about because they're not as sexy. But there is a lot of work there. And it all comes down to making sure that you can create these virtual environments. So digitization and the creation of 3D assets that you can then reuse in anything, back end, front end, it doesn't matter.
That's great. That's such a good use case. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that. I have a question specifically for Elliot, although I'm sure all of you could add to this. But it says, why do 3D images increase e-commerce conversions? What's going on in the customer's mind and environment?
I think it's got a lot to do with honesty. So honesty about the product. If you're looking at a product online in a 2D environment, you're seeing that thing photographed from a specific angle in a specific lighting scenario, and you're limited to how much you can investigate into that product. And often that's why people might go in store to sort of inspect it in their own manner. So having that 3D object in front of you, whether that's on a screen and you can rotate on the screen, or in the form of AR or virtual reality, then it's much more raw, and it's kind of like you're laying all your cards on the table as a brand. So the customer can really explore it how they want to.
And not to mention that some purchases are a little bit more involved. So if you think about a car, yes, you do want to see all the details of that specific car, and hopefully you don't really want to go to the dealership that much. You want to try to usually limit your time there. So if you can configure it in 3D at home, it makes a big difference.
That's great. And so we got a question from the last time, which Tony, I think you took a crack at answering, but sort of weighing the pros and cons of mobile AR and web AR. And then you talked about some of the technical challenges, and, how will also things like cloud rendering, cloud AR, how is that going to kind of optimize, these efforts?
Well, I don't see really any downsides in concept to web AR. The idea that I can just send a link, like if I could put a URL right here in this Zoom right now, and you could just grab that and see something in AR without having to install an app. I mean, why wouldn't you do it that way? The reality is today, the browser's support for AR is not as sophisticated as what you can do in a native app. There's some basics now where Safari can do what they call quick look, which basically lets you just spin an object around in your browser. You have the option to turn the camera on and spin it around. And Google's demonstrated some similar ideas with that for Android as well. There are these libraries you can get, the foremost company here being 8th Wall, which a lot of people have probably heard of, where they're more or less replicating what you can do in your phone-based AR and native with web tech and some great JavaScript, computer vision. They've figured out how to, so you can track as you move your phone around. I mean, when we're doing real AR, you're talking about a few things. First is being able to move through the environment and having track where you are. Second is, estimating the lighting and atmospheric so you can render effectively. And third is detecting surfaces or objects. The simplest things being planar surfaces like floors, tables, walls. All of those things work in 8th Wall, though sometimes I think they're not quite as performant. And there have been some issues that developers have cited about it, but they work pretty well. They work so well that 8th Wall, in fact, they boasted about 100 campaigns last year in AR. Supporting brands, showing products, doing entertainment concepts, like IP, like Into the Spider-Verse. So the technology will catch up, some combination of great third-party tech like 8th Wall and the browser supporting more and more. There's a whole spec out there in theory called WebXR that a browser, if they supported that, would do augmented reality at the level the operating system can do it on your phone. Not quite there yet. So until they get it, as in the browsers haven't been released, Safari doesn't support it yet, etc. So when all those things come together, then the only reason you would do native AR, I think, versus mobile AR is if you had a reason, web AR rather, is if you had a reason to build an app in the first place. There's some reason that you want to actually build an app versus marketing content, just like trying to reach people where they are. The thing is, given what's going on, so just to further complicate this, Amy and team here, given what's going on with COVID, a lot of brands now that wouldn't have invested in building and delivering an app and then spending money on user acquisition to get users to download their app are now doing that because this is how they're going to reach their customers. So the direct to consumer thing is now starting to get some wind behind its sails for more brands too, because they're not spending money advertising, they're spending money selling their products. So they'd rather spend their money getting users in to their product catalog so they can sell them lots of stuff. So it's a very interesting time. So that could drive more, less desire for browser based and more desire for app based, but only if your whole goal is to deliver apps in the first place. If not, then again, you want to find the audience where they are. And where are they? They're in social, they're on web, they're in Unity's platform and ads, they're in, maybe Pandora and, a few hundred million people. You have to go where the audience is, or they're on YouTube. So get them with a makeup try on, right? So it really depends, is it reach or is it functionality? Is it some combo of those? And again, I think that tech-wise mobile AR is going to catch up eventually.
Yeah, and simpler to deploy. And Elliot, what are you seeing with some of your customers, sort of relative to, app-based versus web-based?
We're very keen on having more app-based applications, just because we can put, higher quality content in there. Much larger polygon counts, higher resolution texture maps, and better lighting. But just for ease of use, nearly all of our clients are always like, we want an experience where you can just launch it from a web browser. You haven't got to install anything. That's definitely probably going to be the way things are going to be moving. But as Tony's, illustrated, the tech's not really there yet. And that's why I think for where web AR is right now, it's much more on the user experience than it is on just purchasing a product from there. So maybe it is a case of you want to customize a product as opposed to I just want to view a catalog of products and pick one from that. So that's why I think, if you're using it for things like scale, if you just want to see how this product fits in your living room, or, with that stroller example, how does that fit in my car, or how does that, sit on a pavement? That's a great use case where you don't have to worry so much about the resolution of the AR experience that you're seeing. You're just looking at it as a utility.
And are you seeing that customers, meaning brands and retailers, are actually sort of they'll do both? So they'll kind of leverage those same assets and build a lighter weight AR experience, or are they generally sort of picking a path and sticking with it?
We've come across a few that are doing both, but the ones that are doing both tend to already have an app built. So they have their own shopping app, and they just want to add AR to that, as opposed to building a dedicated app just for the augmented reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Rafaela, what are you seeing with the broad range of customers you're working with?
Yeah, I fully agree with what both Elliot and Tony said, and it's really important to keep in mind, where do you have traffic? If you don't have traffic, you don't have users, then you're back at square one. It's the old days of the apps in general, right? When mobile was coming up with apps, there is a general if they can just extend on the web, that's usually everybody kind of like wants to do that and tries to do that. It's as Tony was saying, that the functionality is a little bit more limited. What you get is a little bit more limited. It also depends on the industry. If you look at furniture, there is almost an understanding now that you have to be able to see what your furniture looks like in the home. So I think for that specific sector of the industry, it's very normal to think I have to have an app that has AR enabled, and I cannot just do web AR. For other industries, they're a little bit more behind. So it's not the same for everyone. Even if you just look at again, if you go back to cars, when you look at a car, you see a 360 video now of the interior of the car. When you look, it used to be that you just look at pictures of the inside the car. Now it's become absolutely common. And if you don't have that, the consumers are going to think that something is broken or something is missing. So I just think that consumers get used to having certain type of functionality that, again, comes in small increments. But then if you take it away, they think that, oh, you don't have everything you're supposed to have, or you're falling behind compared to someone else. So then you see the rest of that specific sector of the industry following along.
And we have another question. This is transferring a store in AR for retail. Will that help retailers attract a consumer base and hold back on inventory to warehouses? So I guess that's sort of a follow-on, Tony, to your, the sort of quick evolution that we think is going to be spurred on by COVID. How sort of Spartan can we make stores, and what do we think the impact of all of this is?
Yeah, well, it's not just about COVID. I think it's also about kind of just-in-time concepts. And the more, Raphael was intimating some of the stuff that if we could make more of our catalogs virtual in the first place. I mean, if everything was, sort of purely virtual and didn't have to exist until you, just-in-time manufactured it at the extreme, then we could have next to zero inventory, physical inventory. Obviously, COVID's related to this too, because you have fewer people working in the supply chain, you have fewer people working in the warehouses, et cetera. But in general, any movement toward this would be something I would think would reduce costs. So that's a production enabler. But more than that, it just makes people who deliver these products more nimble. I mean, you can test market products that never existed in the real world, right? So I don't know, Raphael, I felt like you were kind of hinting at some of that earlier anyway. So I'd love you to jump in on that, but I just think this is a great area for businesses to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I keep on talking about a little bit the back end part of retail, or it's where everything starts. So if you can do the majority of your tasks virtually, and to Tony's point, if you can test products, if you can try them, if you can see, what modifications should you make, not only internally, but also then test them with users, do research that way, do product design that way, you can go a lot further, and you can reduce your mistakes, so to speak, because you'll have less, because you will have already tested it, and you already have an idea of what that is. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is that going to take away the need for physical environments and physical things? No. It's an augmentation, but the same way that in the past you would never think about talking to your consumer only, it was always either on print or TV. That's how you connect with the consumer. You bring your brand. Now, no one would ever think to not do it in social media as well. But it came in little steps, right? And it just provides a different way of connecting with them. You can test things, you can talk to them in a different way, and then you can bring that into maybe what you do on a TV ad or something else like that. It's the same, and I think everyone will expect to have that type of functionality in front of them.
And do you see this sort of evolution now more kind of direct to consumer, and instead of even just leveraging this for testing, do you think that this may evolve in a direction where actually the consumer has a voice around products of the future, and where it's sort of this two-way communication, because we optimize testing products in these digital environments so that actually companies can listen more directly to consumers? And if you see that evolution, how do you see some of that playing out?
Yeah, some of it is truly through kind of like standardized testing or research. It is already being done by regular consumers, and they do it at home. Right? You get tested, they might send you something, they ask you, how do you like it? Or maybe they just show it to you on the web. Now, if we had enough devices that people already own, it would be easier to tell them, hey, open this thing up and let me know what you think about this product. Do you like it? Do you not? How would you change it? And sometimes you don't even need to ask them. The best part about it is that some questions you ask directly, some others you just get the answers by seeing how they behaved, and what they looked at, and what they liked, what they didn't like. And all of this is not far out in the future. We've already done it. Where we get a little bit stuck still, I think the entire industry does, is that there is not such a proliferation of devices in consumers' hands everywhere. So your pool of people that you can go and try to test with is still a bit smaller than it needs to be. But but that's moving too.
Yeah, Elliot, any thoughts on that?
So we've started seeing a lot of brands using 3D models for internal operations as well. So conventionally, when something comes off the production line, you have to photograph it, and this becomes incredibly expensive, but also that's an asset which you end up having to disregard So you can curb this a lot by using that 3D asset for, you know, conventional 2D photography by running it through things like presets. You know, on top of that as well, you can quickly send something around the globe, whereas, you know, normally that might take weeks or months. You can duplicate a 3D file, whereas you can't just duplicate an actual object. So you can get very quick user feedback, both from internal and, you know, your customers.
Tony, you were nodding.
No, actually, see, this is both the strength and the weakness of this wonderful format we're in now, where we have in-stream Q&A. It's like I was multitasking. But yes, I agree with what Elliot was saying. I was nodding about something else. It's great. Like we couldn't do this in a live panel on a stage where we have side conversations, but I keep looking at the Q&A. So
I am too. So I'm trying to multitask.
Yeah. So you caught me on one of those. Apologies.
That's okay.
But this is one I just feel like Jason Jaslow's been patient, because there's a question that came in. I don't know if you're looking at that Q&A window, but it's like the one open one on the Q&A stream. So I wanted to get to it.
Oh, if I missed that, yeah, by all means, let's address it. So Tony, why don't you?
Yeah, let me read it first. AR product displays can be in room scale, see IKEA furniture in your room, or table scale, like Elliot's handbag from the last chat. My experience with room scale is it's harder since it needs to seamlessly integrate into the room versus just a display on a table. What are your experiences, or us here on the panel, with success in these two variations? Well, I can tell you now, just as a consumer, I didn't realize how many things I really want in my house, but I definitely want everything now. And so this idea that it try out functionality of bringing furniture into your living room, or bringing, you know, some kind of, you know, home decor in and putting it in a place to make something look prettier now because you're stuck in here all day. Very important. Mileage definitely varied. Like, you know, Ikea Place, like you typically have to rescale the couch once you drop it into your living room, and that is not perfect. The mobile technologies for recognizing environments are just getting better and better. And what, you know, this is an evolution. So what we currently have, the tabletop stuff works real well of finding that surface and dropping a thing on it. But estimating room scale isn't great yet. We have seen that the newer iOS, at least on tablets, is doing a much better job of that. So the iOS for iPads and the newer iPad Pros can pretty much do, you know, effectively what we call SLAM. You know, you can recognize the whole environment, move around it. So once you've got that, you can actually figure out how to scale that object and get it right, because you can get an actual sense of physical scale and size. So that's hopeful. I think it's a few years out before every phone will do it or whatever, but if we've seen it in an iPad now, I imagine it's going to come in a new generation of phones soon enough. So slightly technical answer, but that's why I think those experiences have been a little more spotty in terms of their satisfactory, you know, experience. Raphael, you're nodding there.
Oh, no, yeah, look, I fully agree. And by the time that it's perfected for the phone, you won't have to look at it through the phone. You'll just look at it through your glasses, and the phone will just power it. So then it's even better. Everything is being prepared to just go right in front of your eyes, because obviously no one wants to stay like this.
When are those glasses going to happen, Raphael? When are they going to look like this?
2023 is a magic year. Let's see if that's true.
So we only have to shelter in place without that for 3 more years? Okay, cool.
Let's not talk about that.
We'll keep wishing. We were hoping it was coming out in 2020, because of course that would make the most sense, but we didn't get our wish.
No.
But it is coming. We know this. So we have about a few minutes left. I just love some final thoughts, and thank you everyone. We've all been sort of ADD kind of following the feed. It's great to have all of this engagement. We are going to take all of this and craft a blog post with it, as well as put the recording of this out. But let's have some final thoughts from everybody, and we'll just go right down the line, old school, with Raphael. Raphael, we'll start with you.
Oh, just don't think of this as something that that you'll have to start thinking about a year, 2 years from now. This is now. Just do it. Make sure that you digitize your content and your products, and just start using those 3D assets in any way that you can, from, again, immersive marketing to any form of commerce. If you don't want to build your own properties, there are a bunch of different platforms where you can do things like this. Again, from social media like Facebook and Snapchat to commerce like Upsells or others. But start working it, because if you wait, you're going to be too late.
That's good advice. Elliot, final thoughts?
I would say for any brands looking to move into augmented reality as a result of Corona, just to be aware of where the state of technology is, and both, you know, creating 3D, hosting 3D, whether it's web AR or mobile AR, just so that you're building an experience which is actually a utility rather than just a novelty. You know, some products, it may be just easier for the user to view on a web page, whereas other things, it's just, you know, knowing the constraints of augmented reality and how that benefits the user as a whole.
And Tony.
So, notwithstanding the last thing that Elliot just said, someday we're going to be shopping for everything, and 3D will have had a hand in it somewhere along the line. It will either be a fully virtual, like the stuff in the Ikea catalog, and just rendered to images, but more than likely we're probably interacting with a 3D digital twin as well. Again, with the exceptions maybe Elliot's highlighted. So someday all products will be sold in 3D. That's the way we're going to do it. Whether we're in AR or VR, some mixed reality, or just looking at it on flat screen, that's where all the media type is moving. And so everyone needs to prepare for that future. And I mean, it's happening around us as we speak, but definitely in the next 3 to 5 years, this is just, this will be the predominant paradigm.
Yeah. We will get to ubiquity. So thank you, everyone, and thanks everyone who were, joined us live today, and for all your insightful questions. Panelists, as always, you were tremendous. And thanks, of course, to Dan Berger and Alex Chuang. And I'm going to hand it back over to James. And thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Amy. It was a really, really wonderful experience. I want to thank the audience for taking part today. We've got a couple hundred questions and comments here, which is phenomenal. And Tony touched on it. This format is providing us an opportunity to connect with the audience in a really, really rich way. So, as a group and as a community that's helping push XR technologies forward, it's everyone that's working together today to drive the conversation forward. So thank you for taking part. I want to thank our sponsors again. Thank you to Shape Immersive, thank you to Accenture Interactive, and thank you to the Vancouver VR AR Association for putting this on. I want to thank HTC, Accenture, Unity, and MXR for lending us their leaders and helping teach us about what's coming down the line and what's happening today with our retailers and our brands. Thank you to Dan and Alex for putting this on. If you'd like to track back, we're using the hashtags Retail AR and Shape the Future to manage some of the conversation. And our next event is going to take place on June 11th. We're really excited for that. We've got a really, really big surprise in place for you. So please make sure that you subscribe to Shape Immersive online, and we'll make sure that you're getting some of those event updates. The recording for this will be available over the next week or two, so you'll be able to come back and go through some of the amazing answers. And there will be a blog post to follow as well. So thank you again to our amazing panel. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Rafaela. Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Elliot. And we will see you again really, really soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.